You will often see this in the Python programming language. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can use this when you're passing arguments to a function. Let's consider this computer program, and you can see we have the definition of a function. This is the signature of the function, and if we look at it, we can see that the name of the function is gross_pay. And if you look here, the function expects to receive 3 values that are going to be passed to hours worked. This represents the number of hours worked by an employee in a week. This is the hourly rate they get paid. And this is the overtime rate that they would get paid. So if they were on double time, for example, this would be passed the value of 2. Here we have the mechanics of the function, and I'll come back to that in a moment, because I now want to go to this program statement, which is responsible for invoking this function. And we can see that because here I've used the name of the function gross pay, which you can see corresponds to this. And down here in these brackets, you can see I've typed in 36, which is the hours worked by the employee, and that is passed to this parameter here. This argument is the hourly rate they get paid. You can read that as $10 or £10, and that is going to be passed to here, the hourly rate. And this argument is 2, because if there is any overtime, it's going to be paid at double the normal pay rate, and this 2 will be passed to here, which is the overtime rate. Now, what this will do, it'll calculate the gross pay, and that will be assigned to weekly wage, and then you will print out the weekly wage. Now, if you look at these numbers, we've got 36, 10, and 2. Now, employees who work 35 hours a week just get normal pay. That's their expected working hours in any 1 week. But this is 36, which means they're going to get an hour's overtime. So they're going to get paid £350 for the normal week. There is 1 hour overtime, so that's going to be paid at twice this £10, because that's what this is telling us, that the overtime rate is twice. So they will get paid an additional £20 for their 1 hour overtime. So in total, what they're going to receive is £370. And here you can see I'm just simply printing out the value. And if we have a look at that, you can see it's coming into view now. And you can see here, it says 370, which you can read as dollars or pounds or whatever currency you fancy. But this is just a function we're looking at, so we can understand what we mean when we pass in to a function. What I'm doing here, I'm passing these values to these parameters here. So this 36 goes to this one, this 10 goes to this one, and this 2 goes to this one here. Now, there are 2 other traces that I would recommend you do. Type this program up, see if it actually gives you 370 as the output, which it should do. Then change this here to 35, and the output you should get in those circumstances is 350. If you then change this to 34, the output you should get is 340. But I'll let you do that trace. But the mechanics are important for you really to get a grip of what's going on here. But what I now want to concentrate on, this line of code and these arguments here and this signature of the function. Before I go on, there's something I would like to point out. The order in which these arguments appear is important, because if you look at these parameters, you can see that the hours worked is first, the hourly rate is second, and the overtime rate is third in order as they appear in the brackets. Consequently, when you look at these, This has to be first if that's the hours they've worked. This has to be second if it's the hourly rate. And this has to be third if it is the overtime rate. And in this case, it's 2, which means it is double time. So the order in which these arguments appear is important. What I recommend you do, just to prove to yourself that this is important, put this 2 here and put this 36 here, run the program and see the output, and I can guarantee you it won't be the right result of 370, which is what you should be expecting. If the hours worked are 36, the hourly rate is 10, and the overtime rate is 2. When the position of these arguments are important, we refer to them as positional arguments, and they must match how the function was defined in its signature, as defined by the order in which the parameters exist here: hours worked, hourly rate, overtime rate. If we consider this part of the program, which is responsible for invoking, or if you prefer, calling the function above, we can see we're passing in numbers 36, 10, and 2, and those will be passed to these parameters here. However, it's not usual to pass numbers in like this. It's usual to have within these brackets the names of variables. And to emphasize the point, I'm going to amend this program to show that. And you can see the amendment coming into view. Here you can see the hours is 36, the rate is 10, and the overtime is 2. So here, the hours, which we can see here we've made 36, is passed to this parameter. The rate, which we can see here is 10, is passed to this parameter, and the overtime, which we can see is 2, is passed to this parameter here. So you can see that when we invoke, I've got variable names here rather than the numbers. Now you can see I've assigned these variables in the code. Now you would not normally do this. These variables would take their data from the contents of some file or other, and that file would supply the 36, 10, and 2. But of course, I'm just demoing this, so I'm just setting these up as dummy data effectively to see if I can get this function to perform in the way in which I want. Now, instead of having these variables here, or as we saw previously, the numbers 36, 10, and 2, I'm going to amend the program again, and instead of having 3 variables, I'm going to put the 36, 10, and the 2 into a list, as you can see coming into view now. Here I've created a list called details that contains 36, 10, and 2, which are the hours worked, the rate of pay per hour, and the overtime rate. And you can see here I'm passing the details into this function, to these parameters here. But if you look at these details, you can see that they were declared on this line as a list, and this is an object reference to that list. So what I'm passing here is an object reference to this, which is the hours worked. So in other words, the hours worked will now contain access to the 36, 10, and the 2, which is not what I want to happen. What I want to happen is for this 36 to go to hours worked, this 10 to go to the hourly rate, and the 2 to go to the overtime rate. But passing in the list as you see here will not work. So I'll run this program and see what we get. And we have what's coming into view now. And it's telling us there's an error and there's a problem with this. And if you look at the error, it's saying gross pay is missing 2 required positional arguments. Now, we discussed what we meant by positional arguments earlier in this video. And it's going on to tell us that the positional arguments are hourly rate and overtime rate. So I'll now remove the error that we're viewing and look to the code. And we can see what's been reported is that these two have not received their data, the hourly rate and the overtime rate, because what this has done, it's passed everything to this one here, and these two haven't received anything. So we've now got to work out how I can arrange for the elements of this list to go to the correct positions here. And it only requires one change to this code, the insertion of one character, and that character is inserted here just before details. And let's have a look at that on the next slide. And you can see here what I've put is an asterisk in front of the details. Now, when we consider this with the asterisk in front, it is referred to as unpacking, in this case, the list. And this will result in the elements of the list being sent appropriately to these parameters here. So the 36 goes to hours worked, the 10 goes to the hourly rate, and the 2 goes to the overtime rate. Of course, as the programmer, you have to ensure that this list has the correct number of elements to match the parameters here. And here you can see there is 3 parameters, so there has to be 3 elements in the list. And of course, because these are positional parameters, these numbers here within the list have to be in the correct order. And in this case, you can see that order is 36, 10, and 2. And if you swap positions of the 36 and 2, you won't get the right result from the execution of this program, because the entries in the list were not in the correct order to reflect the order of these parameters. So if you execute this program, you should see the output of 370, as you can see, coming into position now. And there's your 370 output. It is worth pointing out that I have hardwired this data into the code. In reality, you would be reading the data from a file and storing it in a list, and then you would pass that list to the function as shown here, remembering to put the asterisk in front so that the contents of the list are unpacked and the parameters here received the data after it's been unpacked.